From analog.
Hi, Jim. You have a great signal up here. You're 5.9 plus.
You're digital.
We are everywhere you want to be. This is the CQ Blind Hams Podcast.
Welcome to CQ Blind Hams, where we talk about all things ham radio from a blindness perspective. Now over to Joel Case, W0CAS.
Thanks, Julian. Julian's in 1CA, by the way. We also are joined tonight with a new co-host, Robert, NC5R. Robert, welcome to the CQ Blind Hams Podcast and Roundtable. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you do another podcast, and we want to let everybody know about that while we got you on the line.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Joel. Yeah, I am Robert, NC5R, as you said, and I've really been enjoying myself since the middle of the summer on the Blind Hams Bridge. Kind of inserted myself into a good group of people and have thoroughly enjoyed learning about All-Star and the GD77 radios, and have gotten so much kindness and help from people on the bridge that I really appreciate that. I'm recently retired. Was a university psychologist for 33 years here at Texas A&M University, and have just finished that up at the end of December, and I'm really enjoying retirement. I've been a ham for a long time. Not sure, can't remember exactly how long, but for more than 25 years or so, have been licensed and have been interested in radio ever since I was a kid. So, always loved radio, and am thrilled now to have more time to pursue it. Got an HF station set up with a tower and a TA33 beam and a couple other antennas, and really enjoy those aspects of the hobby. So, but thank you for having me, because I learned a lot about this digital mode from the Blind Hams podcast, and it's a pleasure to now be a part of it.
Well, you forgot to mention that you had a birthday present delivered today, I believe. Tell us what that was.
I gave myself a new radio for my birthday, and I did get it delivered today. It's the Kenwood TS590 SG, and I'm really excited to have it. It's still in the box. I'm going to get it out tomorrow and hopefully get it on the air and start enjoying it. Got a lot to learn about it, but up until now, I've been using an ICOM 746 as my HF radio, which I bought new, like I said, about 25 years ago. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I do another podcast that you mentioned, which is called the Tech Doctor podcast, which is mostly an Apple-oriented podcast dealing with whenever Apple does something, we tend to podcast about it and try to help people with the accessibility piece of it. So that's a little bit about me. And if you like, I'll go ahead and introduce our very special guest for this evening.
All right.
We have with us Hap Holly. And my goodness, Hap, I've heard you doing the rain report for I don't even know how many years, but it's a real pleasure and honor to have a chance to talk with you a bit. And welcome to the Blind Hams podcast. And if you don't mind, Hap, take just as much time as you want. And for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Hap Holly?
No, I've been trying to figure that out for years. And thank you. I live near Chicago and have lived here since 1974. I grew up in Southern California near San Diego and was first licensed as a ham in 1965 at age 14. You can figure out my age from that. I've been retired a year and a half from Horizons for the Blind. I used to take the train out every morning. My wife would drop me off, and it was a 45-minute train ride. And then I would take the train back. late afternoon, and she'd pick me up at the platform. And I was an audio engineer. You may or may not know, I'll do a shameless plug, even though I don't work there anymore. Horizons for the Blind is a 501c3 organization that specializes in the reproduction of print materials into large print, braille, and audio. And that was my department. There were, I think, 3 of us. A humongous department. It was an awful lot to handle, of course. But I enjoyed it a lot there. But after about 20 years, in June of 2019, June 20, I decided I didn't like the direction the company was going. It was under new management, if you will. The original owner, Camille Caffarelli, who founded Horizons for the Blind a number of years ago, some 40 years ago plus, passed on. And her son, Keith, took over the company, and I didn't agree with how he did things and so forth. So I said, okay, well, I'm out of here. So I retired. My last day was July 3rd of 2020. And July 4th was truly a day of independence for me that year.
For sure. And a holiday that has never ended. If it's like me, I wake up and I realize I don't have to go to work today. It's another holiday. It almost has that feel to it. Not really, but in a way, it's so different not to go to work anymore, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Every day is a Saturday. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's good to learn a little bit about what you did, and I'm not surprised to hear that it was audio related, given that you have done audio related reports for a long time regarding amateur radio. Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, about the rain report. How'd you get started with it? How long? Just give us a little background on it.
Okay, well, trying to keep this down to a couple of hours. In the early 80s, I used to listen to Newsline a lot. Of course, it was Westlink Radio in those days and became Newsline not long after. Amateur Radio Newsline there. And I really enjoyed it. I looked forward every week to hearing it because I wanted to know what was going on in amateur radio from a blind point of view, since in those days there were so few sources that were accessible to us for getting information and learning the news and especially in amateur radio. So, about 1985, I thought, you know what? I want more of this. I want more than just 10 minutes a week. That's all it was in those days. Now it's about 19. There seems to be so much more news now than there used to be those years ago.
It's kind of funny for a hobby that's supposed to be dying, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the whole digital aspect of things has done so much to make news about amateur radio that much more available to news outlets like Newsline and This Week in Amateur Radio and the like. So in 1985, I started to do some local production work here in Des Plaines, Illinois, which is where my wife and I still are. And I then got to the point to where instead of doing it live every week, I actually started to put it on cassette. Ooh, boy. High tech, man. Back in those days. And then I used to play it on a repeater. There was a repeater that was called the Bear, the Broadcast Employees Amateur Repeater. And for whatever reason, local broadcasters never got involved much. So that left a door open for geeks like me that wanted to actually have a net that did something besides just talk about testing dates and volunteer examiner times and that sort of thing. So by 1988, I had put the production that I was doing, which was interviewing people and primarily that, interviewing people at the time. And it went national. Well, it was on cassette, and I had the audacity to charge money for it. Yes, I monetized, a term I just learned about 3 or 4 days ago. I monetized my RP report, it was called, and charged, what did I charge? I think $5 a month or something. Well, that went over so well that I think I had 5 subscribers. But, hams are cheap. I mean, they're thrifty.
Frugal's the word.
I like that. That's good. Yeah, that works. And,
how else can we buy all these expensive radios?
I wonder about that sometimes. But that's how it got started. And that was 1990 that the RAIN report actually started. RAIN is an acronym for Radio Amateur Information Network. And it didn't go digital really until, like 96. But not digital. It was still on cassette for me. But actually, in 96, it first became available in real audio on the internet. That was early on. And then by 2000, which is the year I started working at Horizons for the Blind, I was learning how to use computers in the meantime, and started producing the RAIN report in its entirety digitally by 2003, and have been ever since. And I still have the website, therainreport.com. In 2019, I got to where I really didn't want to do a weekly program anymore. It got too much like work. I was working 5 days a week and got home on Fridays and then spent the next 5-6 hours putting the RAIN report together. And so I said, okay. In fact, I promised myself when I started it in 1990 that when it became work, when it became a job, unpaid, mind you, that I would stop. And I did in June of 2019. But 2 months ago, the editing bug bit me again. Only 2 months after I had put it all on the shelf and said, that's it. So I started then what was called the RAIN Hamcast. And I began to produce that every other week. And now, 2 years later, I now have the RAIN Hamcast podcast. And thanks to help from Joel and others, even from Jessica, one of our new members of the Blind Hams group list, who's not even licensed yet, that I now have the podcast version, and that will be of help, especially to you who have the Victor Reader stream, which I have never had. And you now can get it, if you have nothing else to do, on your Victor stream via the Apple and some other.
Yeah, there's about 8 platforms, I think, if it's like the CQ Blind Hams. We go out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, there's Spreaker, there's several platforms, and I'm pretty sure you checked all the boxes that was available through Anchor.fm, like that's what we use.
Except that the boxes, you check them, but they still all want you. They still all have their individual directories, and therefore they want you to register with them individually now. I don't know if that's new, or maybe it's been that way for a while and people didn't realize it. Anyhow, whatever the case is, now that's where it is, and I am enjoying it a whole lot more. A, it's every 2 weeks. B, I'm now retired, and therefore I've got the time to do it and some motivation and that. And also it's on YouTube now as well. So
yes, you have a YouTube channel. That's right. I forgot about the YouTube.
The Rain Report channel, I believe it's called. And so that's enough on that.
I'm really curious though, Hap, just going back in time for a moment. How did you do those early interviews before we had Skype and Zoom and all these ways of connecting with each other digitally to do these kinds of interviews? How did you do them on the phone, or I'm curious, how did you manage to interview people back then?
Yes, it's called Bell, as we used to call it, the telephone. And it's funny because when you listen to some early Rain Reports, and they are, a lot of it is archived on therainreport.com. I'm still trying to find some more from 91 and 92. Anyway, you listen to some of the early stuff, and, oh man, the line noise from a long-distance call from Chicago to California, for instance, was really kind of, well, by today's standards, it would be annoying and unacceptable. But yes, it was all done, and I recorded the interviews on a Tascam Porta Studio, which is for the non-audio file, and I'm one of those. It was a cassette deck that ran twice the normal speed of a cassette deck and had dBx noise reduction, which is even more than C. And when I did start archiving it on tape, on cassette, I used Dolby C. So there wasn't a whole lot of noise then on the actual recording, other than from the phone line.
Well, I personally would just want to say how much I appreciate all the work that you've done over the years and all the information that you've provided. Doing a podcast myself and having done it for more than 10 years, I understand about how it gets old to come home from work on Friday and have this big task ahead. It takes some real commitment, and it's challenging sometimes to get people lined up to come on and be interviewed and have all the scheduling work out. There's a lot to it. So, man, I really appreciate how you stuck with this all these years. It's very cool. Thanks for telling us about that.
Well, one thing that really helped a lot is that beginning in around 88 or 89, I started going to the Dayton Hamvention, and I worked out an agreement with management there, unpaid, of course, to record the forums. And they had 4 forum rooms, and I was able to patch into the mixer in each of the forum rooms and record them on an old GE 5190. 51, what was it? It was the APH 4-track GE recorders that so many folks had. And I would record cassettes, and of course at half the normal speed and 4 tracks. So I could get an hour and a half per track, and I could get 4 tracks per cassette. These were C90s, of course. So I was able to have the tape get turned over every hour and a half in each of the forum rooms so that it would record all the forums. And I would bring them home, and over the next year would catalog them and pick out what talks were useful, what talks that did not rely upon the visual aspects. And that's really too bad, because there were a number of presentations I couldn't use because the speaker relied too much on his or her video element. And sometimes it'd skip over it and delete it out and still haven't made sense. But there were others that would mention. Now, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see Walter Cronkite standing on the Empire State Building throwing peaches off the top and having them land down below on people.
It's a great visual.
Yeah. And and now that I can delete, but if it was a whole lot more technical, as it typically was, what was being viewed, then it really didn't work, because you had to be able to see it in order to understand what the hell was going on, what was being talked about, and what the speaker was trying to portray. So anyway, so I recorded then all of the forums starting in the early 90s, and then eventually by about 2000, I was using a little Olympus recorders, the little, what was there? You guys probably remember them. They were handheld, and they were very small. They were record MP3 or WMA or WAV. And I would record the whole day without having to have any tapes flipped over. It was great. And then I would take it back to the motel room where my wife and I were staying, and I would take each day's content and transfer it over to a laptop. And that I had JAWS on, of course, and took that home and had such really good audio. I mean, the cassette audio wasn't at all bad, but it sure cleaned up a lot and was so much easier to edit once I was able to do it digitally.
Did you record it in WAV or MP3?
I actually recorded it in WAV.
Yeah, it's probably the best quality I bet you could get.
It was. I did. I think I did like 192 and 44.1, that sort of thing. And then, of course, once I got it home, then I would listen to it and have it and edit it in WAV format. But then once it's done editing and once I had the script written and sent to whomever and then returned and did a donut, as I call it, and I then would convert it to MP3, which is what I do with it still today. 64 sample 44.1, and it's worked out real well. It's been
now. Let me say something real quick. We were recording the CQ Blind Hams podcast at 44.1, and I was getting reports from people that were listening to it on the Victor stream that it wouldn't play. And Ian Spencer, or DJ 0HF over in Germany, was telling me one night on a Zoom that he was reading the Reading Rattle magazines and record them at 44.1, and found out that the readers would only play it if you sampled it at 22.500.
Is that right?
That's what he told me, and we even had to change some of our intros to 22.500.
I really should convert in my Raiden Hamcast when I put it out for podcasts, that I should convert it to 22.
Yeah, well, maybe. Robert is the only Victor Reader Stream user on here tonight. Robert, next time when you get a chance to download the Rain Hamcast and see how it plays, and if it plays fine, then send Hap a note, let him know that it's good. But Hap, you asked me a Victor Reader question the other day, and I didn't know how to answer it. Robert, how do you subscribe to a RSS feed on the Victor Reader? Has it got a search engine of some sort?
Yeah, they do. They allow you to search, and gosh, I've been focusing lately almost exclusively on the new Braille Sense 6 podcast app, learning to use that. But as best I can recall at the moment, I think the Victor has a similar search capability, and I believe you can either search by keyword, or maybe there's some categories it'll even give you can search through, but you can enter a keyword, I believe, on the keypad of the Victor Reader using that old T9 style keyboard input that we used to use on the cell phones. But I will check out the podcast. Because I don't doubt that the downsampling helped for some reason with some, but most podcasts that I'm aware of still are 44.1, and most of them do play on the stream, but occasionally one doesn't. So it's still a bit of a mystery exactly what's going on.
And I think the Victor Readers use the Apple platform, if I'm not mistaken. I've heard that somewhere, but I'm not exactly sure. They don't use the Google, or they don't use the Stitcher, but I think they use Apple as the podcatcher. But I'm not sure about that. Julian, you getting any information on Victor Reader Stream users?
Yeah, I haven't heard any, and I would say if Hap hasn't had any complaints, and believe me, there would be if they're Victor Stream users trying to listen to him and not able to. So I would say that if he's not getting complaints, it's probably working okay. But the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that a lot of people are listening to podcasts these days on so many other devices, including the home speakers, the Lady A, for the Amazon Echo products, the Google products. On my iPhone, I use an app called Overcast, which is how I listen to podcasts. So there's so many ways to get podcasts these days that I myself have not used the Victor Stream in that way for quite some time.
Is your podcast available on Alexa?
Yes. Yes, you just ask her to play the CQ Blind Hams podcast, and she'll start playing the latest one, and then just keep playing them backwards.
Now, how does she get that information?
That's a good question. As I don't direct it, I didn't put it out for Amazon to pick it up. They must go to Apple or Google and get it from one of those services.
Yeah, that's pretty much what they do. Is the fact that it's being carried by Apple and some of these other services. I think that's what she just does. You tell her you want a certain podcast, and she'll query it out there, and I guess whichever one has it, she'll play it from there.
Well, that's cool. I like that idea a whole bunch. I'll have to try that when we're finished here.
To kind of take things in a little bit of a different direction, if I may, I was curious about if Hap would take us through a little bit of his overall ham radio career in terms of what it was like in the early days and overall what are the strategies he used to make the hobby accessible to him. I mean, nowadays, of course, we have these radios. We have the GD77 with the open firmware. We have other radios like the Kenwood radios that have some talking capabilities. But I'm curious to know how he did it in the early days before there was all this stuff.
Yeah, me too. I got my novice in 1965, and I took that from a volunteer. This was before we had the VE program, Volunteer Examiner program. And an older ham across town and offered to give me the test. So he contacted the FCC that was 30 miles away in San Diego. And they said he could administer the exam to me. And they sent him the exam. And I took it verbally. And same way with the general. Although in those days, the novice license only lasted 1 year, and it was non-renewable. That really sucked. But that was also a good motivator to upgrade. Well, it didn't motivate me enough because my novice expired for 6 months before I actually took the general. My first call in California was WN6UJH. Pretty awful call. But then that upgraded to WB6UJH. My first rig as a novice, I had a Knight T150 transmitter and a Hammerland HQ170A receiver. And I had a device that I'll bet none of you guys have heard of that I used to help tune me up, make sure I wasn't going over my 75-watt legal limit. And it was called an auditory circuit analyzer. I have no idea who made it. I don't know where my folks got it. I still have it, although it's in mothballs.
Smithsonian Institute. Is that where it's at?
Well, actually, mothballs here at my house. It's. I would like to donate it to, if there ever is a blind ham radio museum.
Ooh.
Get the wheels spinning there, Joel.
Was that the device that you used it by listening to the changing of the pitch?
Actually, it was a device that I listened for a null. You know, I turned up the one big knob on the top of it, and I had a braille notation of like a single dot every 10% or what have you. And I would point it at a certain place, and then I would turn up the power on the transmitter, and when there was a null, I didn't hear anything. I realized, that's where I want to be on the transmit power level. I didn't describe that very well. It also had what they call a wheat stone bridge, which I never used. It had other applications you could use it for, but I used it just for that. And I was able to, because I had someone put a jack in the meter of my Hammerland receiver, I was able to give relative signal reports to folks. I could plug it in there, and wherever it nulled is where it was, where the signal strength, wherever it was, whether it was just the first dot or two, or if it was maybe halfway up the scale, if you will. So anyway, it was that's how I did it that way, and I went on. Oh, geez, this will take forever and a day. But I didn't have really any other adaptive equipment for a long time. My first voice rig was a Heathkit HW100 that a high school buddy built for me, and did a pretty good job. Not perfect, but then he's a high school kid. It was a kit, so anyway, it worked well. But I learned a valuable lesson with that first radio. The 100 did not have any way to tune the voice of who you're listening to. And with a voice like mine, guys on 40 meters that I would talk to often, they had no clue how to tune me in right. And so we would chase each other around the band trying to, because I was trying to listen to each other and thinking, oh, I think that might be the right frequency, a right pitch. I don't know. So I learned that after that to not buy a rig without RIT or incremental tuning or whatever, clarifier, what have you, in order that if a guy wanted to tune me about 100 or 200 hertz off my real frequency, it's okay. I just let him do that, and I would just be able to tune my receive where it should be for him. So, but what else there was no other adaptive technology that I used. Interesting. I wonder how I did it all. I don't know. That was
Well, you just you probably found workarounds the way we all have done. Yeah. So what about nowadays? What of the accessibility that's available now do you take advantage of, and how do you use it?
Nowadays, I too have a Kenwood TS59 DSG with the VG1 speech in it, and I like it a lot. It's very accessible. Talks. It really does talk quite a bit. Not as much as I do, which is too bad, but that's okay. It works well for me, and I just am learning now. I've had the radio 2 years, and I'm starting to get into how to use the digital recorder on it, so I could actually have somebody hear what they sound like when I can transmit them there's some audio from them for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever the time is. I've got a ways to go. I'm just getting started on that. But today, it's because of guys like you that makes it so much more accessible, because some of you guys, both those in the studio and others that are just listening, there's guys like you who have experimented and who have the Joe Stevens folks.
Yeah, I was hoping you would mention your interview with Joe.
Oh, yeah. This guy is phenomenal. He gave me about an hour interview the other night for a Rain Hamcast podcast, and it's going to be a bit to edit because he covered so much, but he's a good speaker, and this guy, he's amazing. He really, I'm duly impressed, and I'm not impressed by by blind people very much.
Oh, Joe is. We've had him on at least 2, maybe 3 times. And it's just, here, Joe, here's the mic. And Julie and I just sat back and just kept our mouth open. Wow.
And it's just like nonstop, good, valuable information. And then, his passion, his dedication, is just his enthusiasm. And this guy, by the way, is not a guy that sits around doing nothing with all this time. He works full time. He has a family, he manages a farm. I mean, he's got a lot on his plate, and it's just amazing that he can juggle all that and still keep putting out this wonderful, game-changing solution that so many blind hams are benefiting from these days.
And to have 9 kids.
Yes. Yeah.
Boy, somebody.
I had 1, and I realized that's the job.
Yeah, my wife and I opted not to have any. But, to have 9 kids, to be doing as much maintenance as he does on the farm. Do you know you guys know he's written 6 books?
Yes. It's, I was going to tell you in the firmware package that we download with his firmware, he puts some of his writings in the package for people, anybody that wants to read them. And yeah, they're inspiring about his life story and some of his fiction. I think he's writing some fiction too, isn't he, Julian?
Yeah.
And all this in Tasmania. I mean, we're not talking about New York City or urban America. We're talking about way the hell down there, 1,000 miles from Australia, according to Echo here. Well, Echo's the name I give my smart speaker. If I say Alexa, the 3 or 4 will go off. I have 4 of them in the house. But I mean, it's just amazing. And how it's amazing how he got to where he is with programming. I mean, he was doing programming before there was any way to any materials that you might need today to learn how to program anything. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it certainly is. So are you using any of the radios with his firmware?
Not yet, but I very much am going to. I wanted to buy a Kenwood 74D, but $500, $600, that's just a little more than I want to spend for an HT.
I've seen them used for $700.
And I was going to say that's if you can get them.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true. That's true. Before Kenwood discontinued them. So, they're sometimes they're up to 800 now in places, and that's absurd. But
that's HF prices there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. So,
we got to get you hooked up with either a Baofeng DM1801 or a GD77, and get you on the Blind Hams network talking to us every day.
It would be fun. I've been listening to it for the last week on my smart speaker here, and that it's amazing though how much better All Star sounds than anything else.
Oh yeah,
yeah. We all started with DMR, but once we went All Star. It's All Star all the time now.
Yeah, well, it's good. And just so you're curious, my 2-meter 440 rig is a Kenwood TMV 71A with the speech synthesizer in it. And On 220, I'm using an Elenco 235, which is not at all accessible, but I have memories in it that are obviously helpful, and I use a reference in Memory Zero of a birdie. I have a birdie somewhere around here. I don't mean a tweet birdie. I mean,
oh wow!
And so that is my reference to Memory Zero. So I know that Memory 13 is this, and Memory 18 or 19 is that, and that helps a whole bunch. And just briefly in my antennas, I have a little 4-element beam on 220. That's up 30 feet, and I keep pointed east towards Lake Michigan, which is about 20 miles east of me, to the 220 repeater I'm active on. The good guy is on 224.52, and I'm, for 2 meters and 440, I have a stick on top of my little 40-foot tower in the backyard. That tower and the Mosley TA-36 6-element tri-bander for 10, 15, and 20 on top of it have been there since 1978.
Good gracious.
And no maintenance. Never have had to bring it down, but that's going to have to stop some year.
Those bolts are never coming out of that tower.
It's an old Heights aluminum, or if you're from the UK, aluminium.
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 What kind of coax are you running on those antennas there, Hap?
Well, let's see, what is it? Oh, they used to call it flexible hardline. 9913, they used to call it.
Right, I've heard of that.
And that's one reason why that's
there you go.
So long. And I have a dipole. I have a dipole for 160, 80, 40, and 17 meters, up 40 feet. Then I have a vertical, 40-meter vertical from 0.5 antennas. They're built here in the Chicago area, and it's a kind of a pricey antenna, but very well built. And it works well. It's funny, 40 meters during the day, is more horizontal. But at night, it's more vertical. And so they both antennas have their purposes. And so I have a lot here, 55 wide by 131 deep, which is typical Chicago suburban lot. And my house is 950 square feet. Yeah, it's little, but it has hot water heat in the floors. It's a boiler, and it's dynamite in the cold weather like we have during the winter.
Yeah, you need that kind of radiant water heat for the floor in Chicago. That would be comfortable in the mornings.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and one nice thing about a small house, it doesn't take as much to heat it or cool it, so that's advantages.
That's true. And for cooling, I just have 3 window units because I don't want to pay the money to have to put in ductwork in the attic because we don't have any. Remember, it's hot water heat in the floor. Thank you. But it does not have any ductwork. And I would have to put in the ductwork and then a central air system. And I think, no, I just stay with
you're fine.
What I got. And it works out well. I also have a solar system now on my roof. I've had it for a year, and that has helped cut down on the cost of the electricity, but it's added to my noise floor.
I was going to ask you about that because I've been hearing a lot about solar panels. Actually, it's the charge controllers that some of them. Now, you can get some that won't have that noise, but I'm not familiar with the brand of them. There are some solar
what
charge
you have
controllers.
to do. The problem is, I don't know what you mean by charge controllers, unless that's what you're referring to as that are called inverters.
Well, this is before the inverter. Well, if you got a battery system, you have a charge controller.
Okay.
It's basically the battery charger. It does all of its to keep from overcharging the batteries and things like that. But you're what's called a grid tie system.
Yeah, I have 17 panels on the roof, and it's interesting because certain times of day, depending upon where the sun is in the sky, that I have more or maybe less noise. And of course, if it's cloudy, overcast, hey, it's not bad at all. But that's why nighttime is the best after sundown. But I really would like to resolve a problem and haven't had a whole lot of success so far.
Well, I tell you, we are so thrilled to have you on tonight. Robert, do you have any more questions for Hap? Because we're getting into his HF radio tonight.
Oh, no, I'm doing okay. I'm, that I can do any time, and I do in the mornings. And in fact, Fridays at 11 a.m. Central, I'm a net control for Midcars, Midwest Amateur Radio Service on.
Oh, I've checked in the Midcars quite a few times. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and that's fun, and it works out well. So now there you go. Anyway,
I'll have to tune into that and give it a listen and maybe check in one of these days. With this new radio, I'm going to be playing a lot of HF.
Yeah, and if you need any help, there are plenty of people to call, but you can always get a hold of me. Do you have a Joe N3AIN's audio tutorial on that?
I do. We have it on the YouTube and on this podcast, both of them.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I did download that, so I'm going to go through that, and I've got the manuals in accessible format. So I'll learn. It'll take a little while, but I'll get up to speed with it. It's going to be fun. I'm excited about it. I don't really have more questions, but it's been such a pleasure to meet you and to learn a little bit about you and your radio hobby and the rain report. Wow. How cool to kind of revisit all that a little bit. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And we haven't even talked about my wife and how I met her, but we can do that another time.
We can have volume 2.
All right, part 2. There we go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just wanted to get you on and let everybody on the CQ Blind Hams know about the rain report, or the rain Hamcast, as it's now rebranded, and now it's in podcast format that they can get on any podcatcher. And so be sure and subscribe to the Rain Hamcast. And I did that the other day, and I listened to the 2 episodes that I had automatically downloaded the first time. So I've got to go back and get some more of the archives, and I want everybody to do so. Julian, you got anything else for Hap?
No, other than to thank you for coming on here and sharing with us about the rain report, as well as your experiences with ham radio vis-a-vis accessibility. It's always good to get these different perspectives out here, especially from someone like yourself who's got a lot of history with this hobby.
Well, I will toot my horn here a little bit, that I was the 2002 Ham of the Year at the Dayton Hamvention, so that was
wow.
That was quite an honor. I remember they called me in March of 2000 and whatever it was, 2002, and they told me that I'd been named the Ham of the Year, and I thought, I was speechless. Wow. Which is really unusual for me. I'm such a blabbermouth. Oh, there was dinner. That's back when they had banquets. I don't know if they have banquets now. We're done. My wife and I are now done going. It's too much of it's a lot of labor. It's a 300 drive. 300 drive. Hello. Sounds like golf, which I don't do. 300 miles each way from Chicago. And since I'm no longer really doing a lot of production work now, relatively speaking, I'm done. I put in my time and let's see, since 1985, that's 30, almost like 40 years or something like that. Anyway, it's a while, and I'll just say also, I put 40 years in with the local Lions Club before it dissolved a couple of years ago, our local one here in Des Plaines, Illinois. And I put in 39 years with Toastmasters. You may or may not be familiar, but Toastmasters is a phenomenal organization for anybody to learn how to communicate better and so forth. So I've kept busy. I'm keeping busy now. Thanks for interviewing me. I think I've been interviewed, on the fingers of one hand in all these years.
Well, it's time. You've put in a lot of, put your dues in, and now it's time for you to be celebrated. And in 2002, we can now say we have had an award-winning ham on our program. So thanks for that. You being our one and only award winner.
That and a buck and a half might get you a cup of coffee somewhere, but I don't know.
Where?
Well, Hap, I want to say good night to all the listeners. And we usually end the show by saying 73.
73 to all of you.
7-3, everybody.
73.
Please don't forget to subscribe to CQ Blind Hams podcast and also visit www.blindhams.com.